calculations are correct, well, they are. This video is either going up really late on a Sunday, which is my usual upload day, or it's going up at the usual time a day later on Monday. Either way, the video is late. I'm sorry about that. It's just been a week, you know. We're in tier 4. You get it. I'm in... It's fine. So this video was actually inspired by a TikTok that I saw, and for the life of me, I don't remember who it was. I don't have a TikTok account. I just consume TikToks based on the ones that my friends who do have TikTok send me. So that's how I saw it, so I have no way of like going back through my likes or my history or whatever. So if somebody sees this and I get called out for copying someone, it's something I saw on TikTok, and if you know who it was, please tell me so I can credit them. But today I will be recommending you books based on your favourite Barbie movie. Yes, that's right, you're getting customized book recommendations based on the BCU, the Barbie Cinematic Universe, the most impactful cinematic universe there is. And I do worry that these recommendation videos are getting a bit repetitive because I need to read some books so that I have more options for the prompts, because I feel like some of the prompts are kind of the same and I'm just recycling the same old books. So if you see me doing that, no you didn't. I promise I will read some more books soon. So if your favourite Barbie film is the iconic Princess Charm School, because why wouldn't it be, here we have a weird competition, an old school, rivalry between the students, fairies, personalised fairies for each student at said magic school, and an old secret and like a royal cover-up. The Crown wishes it was Princess Charm School. And for this first one, I'm gonna just go ahead and recommend a book that I haven't read because it fits. So this is The School for Good and Evil, which I've spoken about before. It is a middle grade book that I am so excited to get to. I meant to read it around Halloween and it just didn't happen. So this is about two young girls, Sophie and Agatha, and I believe that they're like best friends but kind of polar opposites, as you can see from the cover. Like one of them is like dark and gothic, one of them is like white and angelic, and you know, it's a school for good and evil. So I feel like there's going to be some rivalries, there's going to be some secrets, some backstabbing, and I feel like because it's middle grade it'll also have that kind of wholesome Barbie vibe if you're into that. The next Barbie film is Swan Lake, so number 1 in the iconic holy trinity of Barbie films that comprises of Swan Lake, the Nutcracker, and Rapunzel. Those are the god tier ones. I don't make the rules, I'm sorry. So if you're a fan of Swan Lake, I recommend Tangleweed and Brine by Deirdre Sullivan, and this is a wonderful collection of fairy tale retellings. And Deirdre Sullivan is Irish and she's very into kind of Irish folklore as well. She has another collection that just came out, not a collection, another retelling that just came out called Savage Her Reply, which I really want to read. But this has retellings of Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, Hansel and Gretel, Rumpelstiltskin. So all of those kind of classic ones. There's Little Mermaid, Bluebeard, as well as other ones that are lesser known like Frog Prince, Goose Girl, Donkey Skin, things like that. And Deirdre Sullivan has a really beautiful prose, just beautiful. So it's not obviously just a Swan Lake retelling. I don't actually think there is one of Swan Lake in here. But it just has that vibe of lyrical prose, almost like you're kind of flowing down a river like a swan. That's the tenuous link that I'm gonna attach myself to for this video. Also, Once Upon a River, I believe it's called. I don't know if it's a Swan Lake retelling, but it has a swan on the cover, and I'll just chuck it in for this prompt because I want to read it soon and it looks cool. The next film is Nutcracker, which is absolutely one of my favourites because they use the original Tchaikovsky score and it's gorgeous. It's so lovely. It makes me feel so Christmassy and it just has that festive vibe. And I remember one year my mum got me tickets to go and see the Nutcracker at the Royal Opera House, or like I think it was the Royal Albert Hall, and it was like a really prestigious like ballet performance of the Nutcracker. And I was just sitting there being like, I'd rather be watching Barbie. Like, I'm sorry. The costumes were gorgeous and the whole set design was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but I just heard those opening chords and I just was like, Barbie. So if Nutcracker is your favourite Barbie film, I recommend the collection The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo, which I do have in physical copy, but I forgot to get it down off my shelf, and God help me if I'm gonna stand up and click my back and then sit down and refocus. It's not happening. So Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. I will insert an image of it here. It has a dark Nutcracker retelling in this collection, one that I'm thinking of doing a video on soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But Leigh Bardugo, again, like Deirdre Sullivan, wonderful way of crafting story tales, fairy tales and folk stories. Story tales. Oh wow. The next film is Rapunzel. Iconic. Beautiful. The sequence where she does the dress, though she paints with the magic paintbrush and she has all the different dresses. I tear up every single time. It's beautiful. The music, the way it swells. Beautiful. So my immediate go-to for this one is Cersei, and I feel really bad. I feel like I've used Cersei in every single tag recommendations video because it just fits so many different vibes. The reason it gives me Rapunzel vibes is because in this book Cersei is banished to a deserted island, and while she's on the deserted island she starts to hone her witchcraft and she learns all about the plants and the herbs and the animals around her, and she's banished there by Zeus or some big annoying sexist god, and you know, she's banished there because they're afraid of her power. And I think that it just has that same vibe as Rapunzel. You know, Rapunzel's imprisoned in a tower alone because Mother Gothel is scared of her for one reason or another, depending on which adaptation you read. And it's just a wonderfully written book, and it perfectly captures that feeling of loneliness but also contemplative. It captures that feeling of loneliness but also contemplation. So there's this sense of like anticipation. So you know that this girl that has been trapped away, this girl that has been cut off from the rest of the world, that's not the end of her story. You know that there's something else coming, and I feel like Cersei perfectly captures that vibe. Also for Rapunzel, I'm gonna just chuck in Priory of the Orange Tree, which is quite a big boy just to chuck in. But this cover, how do you not get Rapunzel vibes from this cover? I mean, it's not really anything to do with Rapunzel apart from the fact that there's a queen in this book, and the queen doesn't have a husband or an heir, and there's a growing pressure on her to produce an heir, and the more that looks like that's not happening, the more terrified she gets of people in her kingdom. So people trying to usurp her, people trying to undermine her power because she can't produce an heir, and you know, they want to replace her with someone who can produce an heir and like keep the line strong. So she gradually gets a bit more paranoid. So that's kind of, I guess, the Rapunzel vibe, is this queen who's slowly growing more paranoid and panicked and feels that she can trust less and less people. But there are also lots of other threads in this book that have nothing to do with Rapunzel. But there are dragons in this one, so I don't know if they're purple or not, but maybe Penelope will show up in Priory of the Orange Tree. The crossover event you didn't know you needed. Next is an iconic film, which is Barbie Fashion Fairy Tale. This is one of the newer ones, and I know that there is some discourse in the Barbie film fan community. Not really, but you know, a lot of people prefer obviously the older ones, so, you know, Rapunzel, Swan Lake, all of the classics, and Barbie Fashion Fairy Tale is a newer one. The animation is a little bit questionable in places, and the plot is not as, you know, strong. It's not adapting a fairy tale or anything, it is just Barbie designing some clothes in Paris. The plot is not airtight, I'm not gonna lie, but it has the vibes. Like every Barbie film, it has the vibes. It has an iconic song in the soundtrack, which I'm not ashamed to admit that I've got on my iPod. I also bought it for my friend B on DVD when we were like 13, 14, like too old to be enjoying it, but it's just iconic. And so if you're also a fan of Barbie Fashion Fairy Tale, I would recommend the film, but also the book of A Devil Wears Prada, because full disclosure, that's the only one I could find on my shelf that related in any way to this prompt. So I need more books about fashion and fashion houses. I do have a lot of non-fiction books on like Alexander McQueen and Yohji Yamamoto and Guo Pei, some of my favourite designers, but I just don't feel like they have that Barbie vibe. But Devil Wears Prada, very, very fun. It has that kind of coldness of the fashion industry, and Meryl Streep is fantastic in the film, but it also has that vibe of like excitement. I watch that film and I see Anne Hathaway running through New York with like bags over her arm, like with a tray of like 4 coffees and this beautiful hat and sunglasses, and like, I need to get to the office, and I'm like, I wish that were me. And I feel like the Barbie film has that same vibe, is that you see Barbie like trying on all these different fabrics and putting on fashion shows and like strolling around with like her little dog or whatever, and I'm just like, I wish that was me. Like head empty, no thoughts, just twirling around in beautiful dresses. That's all you want. The next film is Barbie the Diamond Castle, and for this one I picked up Perfectly Preventable Deaths, also by Deirdre Sullivan. And this is a bit more of an autumnal book. It's not as fluffy as the Barbie film, but in this film is a castle, not made of diamonds, but it is an old crumbling castle. It has lots of secret rooms. One of the secret rooms is very integral to the plot later on. It has witchy vibes. These 2 twins move into this castle that belongs to their stepfather, and gradually as the book goes on they find out more about the castle and the history of the town and the growing magic that's kind of surrounding them, and it's very atmospheric, and it centers around a castle. So if you enjoy castles, these links in this video, tenuous. And the next film is very topical, Barbie, A Christmas Carol, which I have to admit is one of the adaptations of Christmas Carol that I've enjoyed the most. I'm not a big Christmas Carol fan. I've not seen the Muppets version. I have not seen Scrooge, the one with Bill Murray. I haven't seen the one that was in cinemas a while ago, and then there was one on BBC a year ago. People are always adapting that story, and I just feel like whenever I feel like, oh, I want to watch that, I just like, I know that story so well, and I just feel like it's always being shoved down my throat, and therefore the desire to read it or watch it is not so great. But the Barbie version, I'll watch that any day. So if Barbie Christmas Carol is your favourite Barbie film, I recommend that you read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And this is not set at Christmas time. I should have really picked a Christmassy book for this prompt, but I feel like it deals with a lot of the same themes. So this follows Nora, who after she commits suicide finds herself in this place between life and death in the Midnight Library. And in this Midnight Library she gets a chance to try on all of the different lives she could have led, and it deals a lot with regret and facing who you are and things that could have been. And I feel like A Christmas Carol also deals with those themes of when Scrooge is confronted by the ghost of Christmas present, past and future, you have to confront who you are and what your life looks like, and whether you want that to be the same or whether you want to change things. And I feel like The Midnight Library captures that essence. The next film is Barbie Princess and the Pauper, and you're probably getting to the point in the video where you're like, I didn't know there were this many Barbie films. Yes, and I'm not doing all of them. I'm only doing like the ones that I've seen and the ones that I think people will know. There are so many more. There are so many more than this. But for Barbie Princess and the Pauper, I am recommending A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. And on the surface, this has nothing to do with the story of Prince and the Pauper. And it doesn't really. Again, the link is tenuous. But this follows Kel, who has a magic coat, and he trades magical artifacts between worlds, which is illegal. He's not supposed to be doing that. But in the world that he primarily lives in, he has a stepbrother called Rye, and Rye is a prince, and obviously Rye's parents are the king and queen, and they've taken Kel in, but they treat him, I think, slightly differently than they do to obviously their royal son. So it's not really a Prince and the Pauper story, but I mean, Rye is a prince. And Kel is kind of the pauper, but not really. But I don't know, I just love the dynamic between Kel and Rye. I think it's a really interesting part of this series, and obviously then there's so much else that goes on with the fantasy and the evil threats, and then Lila comes in, Queen of My Heart. But yeah, I feel like the brother relationship between Kel and Rye is something that is really lovely in these books that I don't hear highlighted enough. So I thought, you know, for this prompt I would segue it in so I can have an excuse to talk about Kel and Rye. Next one, Barbie Fairytopia, and I feel like you know what I'm gonna say. The best fae book in the whole world. Cruel Prince ticks all of my boxes. So this is the one that I'm going to recommend because it is beautiful and iconic. I love the world building, I love the characters. I feel like I don't need to talk about this anymore because I talk about it all the time. But if you're looking for anything to do with fae, this is the book. This is the book. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit fudgy. Because I feel like films like Nutcracker and Rapunzel, they have the same sort of vibes. It's like fairy tale, whimsy, classic stories. And I feel like that's quite easy to come up with books that have a similar feeling to them. Where it gets hard is when you have a film like Magic of Pegasus, which is about a flying horse. But I have decided to go with Strange the Dreamer because I will plug Strange the Dreamer whenever I can. And I don't believe that this has magic horses, but it does have a floating city in the clouds. So I feel like kind of. So Strange the Dreamer is a wonderful book and I will talk about it till the end of time. But we have a city called Weep which disappeared from the world suddenly, and no one remembers what the city was originally called, so everyone refers to it as Weep. And then one day a congregation comes from the city and they ask for help, and when the characters arrive in the city they find that there is a floating palace above the city and it's blocking out the sun and no one knows what to do. And it's just full of magic and it's full of, not necessarily whimsy, there are some quite dark elements of the story, but it just perfectly captures that feeling of magic and impossible stakes almost, and just this weightlessness, like you just feel like anything could happen in this book, anything is possible. And I don't know, I guess that's what you would feel if you had a flying horse. I'm so sorry to all of the authors of the books that I've included in this video because I'm just talking shit, aren't I? None of this makes any sense. Your book is what I imagine having a flying horse would feel like. Imagine saying that to somebody. Wow. The next Barbie film is Barbie Thumbelina, or I don't know if it's Barbie Thumbelina, or if it's just Thumbelina. Thumbelina, anyway. And what I've gone with that is Tales from Moon Valley, because I think it has that perfect kind of oddity-ness. Oddity-ness, that's not anything. So Thumbelina obviously follows a very tiny girl who is born in a flower, lives in a flower. She's very small and there's a flower. So I feel like Moon Valley is a perfect kind of book for this because it has a lot of nature in it. So obviously Moon Valley, it's like this beautiful valley and there's lakes and there's forests and there's you know, the wildlife really comes through in this book, and it has lots of weird creatures in it and lots of strange and wonderful things happen, and I just feel like it has that same kind of uniqueness. Look at them all, look at that weird cast of characters. Tell me that they wouldn't be friends with Thumbelina. They absolutely would. The next Barbie film is 12 Dancing Princesses. And luckily for me, I recently read a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, which is the House, no, it's just called House of Salt and Sorrows. So House of Salt and Sorrows, which follows 12, they're not princesses, they're 12 daughters of a lord, and at the beginning of the novel I believe 4 of them have died, 3 of them have died. A bunch of them have died, and the ones that remain think that their family is cursed, and it's very atmospheric. These girls live in a big castle by the sea. The rocks are rocky and the sea is choppy, and they wear lots of beautiful dresses, and there's ghosts and there's balls, and it's just wonderful. And I feel like if you like the original story of the 12 Dancing Princesses, that you should check this out. And the last film is Barbie Three Musketeers, and you know what, I don't even know if I've seen this one. I just literally googled Barbie films and included the ones that I had vaguely heard of, but I couldn't really tell you what the Barbie Three Musketeers movie is about. But vaguely I know that the Three Musketeers, it's like, you know, camaraderie, swashbuckliness, defeating evil and whatnot. And this book has kind of nothing to do with that, but I'm gonna plug it anyway, and it's Kill the Boy Band by Goldie Moldavsky, and it follows these three or four fangirls who are obsessed with this band called the Ruperts, who are very much like, you know, One Direction or the Beatles back in the day. These four girls are obsessed with this band, and they track them down to their hotel, and then an incident happens and one of the boy band members ends up dead, and it's about how these girls, these fangirls, band together to deal with it. And it's nothing really like the Three Musketeers, but it just is quite a funny take on teamwork and like that fangirl mentality. And I just think it's a fun, girly book, because there are lots of other books that I could have recommended that had a vibe of the Three Musketeers, but you know, specifically Barbie, the Three Musketeers, I feel like Kill the Boy Band captures that girly, fun, wholesome, adventurous camaraderie vibe. So those are my recommendations, and I am a big fan of the Barbie cinematic universe, if you can already tell. So if you have any recommendations to do with any of the films or that have that similar vibe, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.